It's somewhere in the near future, and most of the world you grew up in is already gone. The ice caps melted, releasing bacteria that had been frozen for millions of years. Fish populations collapsed, and climate breakdown pushed country after country into food shortages, riots, and total chaos. And you live in Siam, the one country that sealed its borders more than 10 years ago, and somehow kept the lights on. One company is to thank for that, for figuring out how to farm insects and keep an entire starving nation fed. But there's a catch. Things keep working around here because the government keeps a tight grip on everything. The power goes out every night at 8, and soldiers are posted around every corner of the city. Still, the rest of the world collapsed 10 years ago and you're still breathing. So given the alternative, you'd probably still call that a win. That said, one night, for whatever reason, you end up at the hospital. Maybe you work there, maybe you're waiting around for medication, or maybe you just needed a doctor yourself. Either way, it doesn't matter because you're here now. And of all the places you could have ended up when shit hits the fan, a hospital doesn't sound like the worst place to be. At least if you didn't obsess over survival situations, that's probably what you'd think. Because the hospital seems relatively safe since they got backup power, doctors, security, and an entire staff whose job is to keep you alive. And that is technically true until a patient upstairs flatlines on an operating table and he sits back up and starts biting the people trying to save him. If not for that little detail, this place might not be half bad. And that's where today's episode starts. Oh, and if you've never seen this movie before, don't you worry about it. But just to give you a little hint of what's to come, it's basically a Muay Thai movie where the main character punches and kicks his way through a zombie apocalypse. So today, we're dropping you into the hospital as a regular person while Singh, a former fighter the movie follows around, beats the hell out of zombies like they owe him money. And we're gonna figure out what you'd see, when you had to leave, and when the hospital stopped being somewhere you could simply walk out of safely. Okay, before we get into your escape windows, we need to go over some stuff first, because the outbreak starts with a delivery truck long before anyone inside the hospital knows there's any danger. Singh, our zombie ass kicker, works security for the VS Corporation, the company whose insect farm project kept Siam fed when the rest of the world was starving. He's planning to quit his job though, because his girlfriend Rin, a doctor at the hospital we eventually end up in, wants him to leave the city and move further north in Thailand. The problem is that Singh has been promising to quit for a while. On this last supply run, we see him sitting next to a guy named Sanchai in real life, who's an absolute beast of a Thai fighter, and widely considered one of the greatest of all time. This has absolutely nothing to do with the video, but it's a fun little detail, and I'm sure some of the fight fans watching this video will recognize him immediately. I think it's even funnier because Singh is an underground fighter in this movie, so doing this scene with an actual fighting legend was probably a little bit intimidating. That said, Singh and his homie Sanchai end up getting ambushed during the supply run, but almost immediately the tables get turned on them when Singh beats the brakes off of everybody. And I think a lot of us could agree on that Thai boxing is one of the coolest looking martial arts ever. This takes me back to my teen years watching Ong Bak. The stunts and fight choreography are just so goddamn good. Anyways, Singh fights off the raiders in spectacular fashion, but a crate gets damaged, so their boss ends up docking their pay and throws the money in Sanchai's face and tells him to keep the crate. Despite that little bump in the road, Sanchai gives Singh a dirt bike he promised him, and when they finally pry open that broken crate, they find fish. Real fish has become so rare that Sanchai immediately starts talking about splitting it up right there. Neither of them have had anything this good in years. Over at the VS headquarters, that same crate is being shown off to a room full of investors. A company official named Purik tells everyone that Vasu, the head of the VS Corporation, has somehow made the impossible possible again. According to him, the fish are completely safe. So safe that Vasu plans to give it to his own wife. And to prove how confident he is, Purik takes a bite himself first. Shortly after, he starts puking up some black stuff and collapses on the ground. A little later, after busting Singh's balls for his dangerous job, Rin heads to work for the night at the hospital while he stays home. On the way there, she talks to her best friend Mink, who can tell right away that Rin and Singh argued again, and Rin admits that she's worried he's going to get himself killed. Now, we finally arrive at the hospital where today's episode takes place, and everything looks pretty normal. Patients are coming in, people are being treated, and absolutely nothing would set off any alarm bells yet. And then a hospital director pulls Rin away from her scheduled operation and takes her to the restricted 10th floor. And just a side note, does this guy look a little bit like aging Colonel Sanders? Anyway, while following the hospital director, Rin sees Purik popping and locking on a gurney. We then head upstairs where we learn that Vasu's wife has been in a coma for 5 years and depends on regular blood transfusions to stay alive. Vasu wants to try feeding her fish liver because he thinks it could improve her condition. I have no idea where he got that idea from, and I'm pretty sure the movie never explains it, but Rin pushes back because nobody has confirmed whether or not the fish would benefit any of the patients. Vasu then tells them this country only survived because of his food, so he wants to try helping his wife his way this time. We then cut to Purik being treated, where he eventually flatlines, and his eyes turn completely black. A few seconds later, after he's declared dead, he gets back up and attacks the nurse. This is the point where all hell breaks loose in the hospital and we see our first infected. From here we could jump into our escape windows. Alright, so window 1, and this is the one most people miss, and you'll see why. In other movies I've covered, there's usually at least some sort of small hint that might tip you off, but not in this one. Before Pyrrhic turned, the hospital was completely normal like I mentioned earlier. You could come and go as you please. And from where you're standing, you had no idea about the tainted fish, or the infected person that entered the building that was about to tear shit up. If you were already on your way out or got cold feet and decided you didn't want to see your doctor today, then you would have gotten out just fine. It's also possible that if you saw Pyrrhic flopping around like a fish on the gurney, you might have noped out of here. It is unlikely for most people though. I feel like that wouldn't be that uncommon of a sight in a hospital. So for that reason, most would miss this window, which again is why I call it the invisible window. Okay, so window 2, this is the first window you can actually see, and it opens when Pyrrhic gets back up and attacks the first person in the operating room. If you saw the attack or heard the commotion, you needed to get your ass out of there ASAP. And at this point in the movie, an announcement comes on telling people to stay away from the hospital. We then see Singh leave and head toward it, which likely saved him from cooking up that contaminated fish which is now moving around in the bowl. By the time he gets there, everyone is being told to stay back. Then somebody falls from the roof, which is a pretty good sign that whatever's happening inside of the hospital is starting to get out of control. No one knows about the infected yet either, so a soldier gets a bit too close and gets bitten for his mistake. Now the virus is outside of the hospital and chaos is about to break out. Again, this is another window for you here. If you're already outside, you could have made your move away from the hospital before the soldier got bit. After that, this window pretty much slams shut because another announcement comes on instructing people to go back to the hospital or they'll pay serious consequences. Since Singh is looking for Rin, that ends up working out in his favor, but for you, not so much, because you want to get the hell out of here. So if you're still inside the hospital, all the people Pyrrhic bit will be tearing through the building as soldiers form a perimeter outside and stop people from leaving. So you basically had to have been out that door as soon as the first announcement came on, or just before. If you were in the room when Pyrrhic attacked the first person, it's also possible you could have hightailed it out of there. Okay, so window 3, at this point your clean escape windows are all gone. They haven't all closed on you, but it's getting harder to leave. The hospital is now sealed, the infected are spreading through the halls, and the soldiers are outside keeping everybody in. So now that you can't simply walk out the front door, the next question is what can you do to get out of here? Inside, we see Rin hiding in an office with the hospital director, Agent Colonel Sanders. He looks injured, and she promises him that she won't leave him behind. Then she gets up to go peek outside to see what's happening, but when she turns around, the injured director is gone. While looking for him, she hears something moving around, and it ends up being the director eating one of the nurses. And when he notices her, he jumps through the window and tries to attack. Fortunately, the shelves block him long enough for Rin to escape. Now, I'd like to say in situations like this where bites are clearly turning people, you probably shouldn't turn your back on somebody who's been injured and is potentially infected. But in all fairness, at this point, I don't think anyone really knew how the virus transferred or what the hell was really going on, so we'll cut her some slack. Meanwhile, Singh reaches the hospital intercom and starts calling for Rin. She hears his voice and runs over to answer him, but the power cuts out before she gets the chance. On the bright side, at least they know each other are alive still, but neither knows exactly where the other is. We then see Singh below, kicking some absolute zombie ass, fighting his way up a hallway. And despite how cool this looks, let's be honest here, the last thing you ever want to do is punch a zombie in the face. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in zombie movies. This movie's cool and it's a fun watch, but come on. I think every zombie fan can agree with that. And even if you didn't know that they spread the infection through bites, would you really want to risk cutting your knuckles open on blood-covered teeth? Surely you saw them chomping on guts by now. Anyways, while beating zombie arse, he comes across Mink's son, Buddy, but before he can make it to him, the boy ends up getting bit on the leg. Luckily for the kid, the zombie who bit him was sporting a set of dentures. After that, they end up moving through the hospital together since the kid knows Rin and what floor his mom is on. We then jump back to Rin, who keeps moving and eventually finds a security office. But the door is locked and the keys are still attached to a security guard that she thought was dead. But he ended up being very much alive and very much infected. She manages to grab the keys, get inside, and blocks the door with the filing cabinet, which stops the guards from getting in. Now, if you find yourself in a security room, it could be a solid place to hide temporarily since the doors and glass are usually reinforced. This should also be connected to the building's cameras, radios, and electronic locks, giving you a way to watch the halls and control access. In here, you can gather enough intel to help plan out your next move. The problem is that it can become a trap if there's only one way in and out and zombies start piling up at your door. So I would use this as a staging area before continuing to try and escape. That said, while checking the monitors, Rin notices that Vasu is still alive, hiding inside the restricted room with his wife. Heading toward him makes sense because she knows who he is, and she knows the room is still secure. And right now, he's the only living person that she could actually see. But for you, if you're in that security room, seeing a random person on the monitor doesn't mean you should move toward them. If you know who they are or they're in a less compromised area than you, then sure, it might be worth moving toward them. Just keep in mind that reaching that person means moving deeper into the hospital, and you're gambling on that person actually wanting to work with you to try and escape or letting you into wherever they're hiding. So that gamble is more likely to work out for Rin, which is exactly why we see her moving toward Vasu. You don't get that same guarantee though, so I'd use the cameras to find whatever road is still usable while it's still possible. So this window only lasts while the cameras can still show you a way through the hospital. Once every route on those monitors is packed, you're basically screwed. While everybody at the hospital is fighting for their lives, the military leadership sits down and makes a decision that'll decide the fate of everybody inside the hospital. They don't know what the infection is, public health can't identify it, and nobody wants to send a team into the hospital to separate the healthy from the infected. Instead, they decide to blow up the hospital because Bangkok has roughly 5 million people, and only about 500 of them are inside that hospital. To be fair though, as ruthless as it may be, the logic is sound. If the infection escapes into Bangkok, it could spread across the entire country. Ultimately, blowing that place off the face of the earth is for the greater good. Should you find yourself in a similar situation, it would be fair to assume that that could be the outcome. I'm not saying it will be, but it absolutely could, especially if it comes down to a handful of you versus a million other people. So time is of the essence here. The only people exempt from getting blown sky high are Vasu and his wife Anne. The government orders an extraction team to enter the hospital and bring them out before the demolition, giving the man whose company feeds the nation a squad, a 30-minute deadline, and a helicopter above the building. Meanwhile, Singh and Buddy work their way through the lower floors looking for Mink. They finally find her in one of the wards with babies, and for a second, Buddy thinks everything is okay. Then Mink reveals that she's been bitten. She tells Singh that Rin is on the 10th floor, makes him promise to take care of Buddy, and refuses to abandon the newborns. I guess she'd rather turn inside of there and eat them all. Buddy wants to stay with her, but Mink tells him to stay strong and sends him away. Now, from inside the building, seeing a helicopter and an armed rescue team might make you think help has finally arrived, which is fair, but they aren't coming for you as we established a minute ago. But you have no way of knowing that as a random patient inside of the hospital. And I've pretty much said this all throughout the series I've been doing on my channel, but you should never blindly move toward the military in an outbreak, especially since we saw them gunning people down outside at the start of the movie to try and keep them inside the hospital. So now if they're inside, you should probably start questioning it a little bit. So instead, if you saw soldiers moving through the building, mowing down the infected, the roads they clear could lead you toward another way out. Your safest option would be to follow them from a distance and letting them deal with whatever's ahead. Just don't walk up expecting them to welcome you aboard. Until you know how they're treating the other survivors, revealing yourself could get you shot. This next stretch is your false rescue. We jump back to Rin, who reaches Vasu's room seconds before the infected catch up to her. He asks if she's infected, she says no, then he tells her help is on the way. Personally, I wouldn't take that answer at face value in a situation like this, especially with your wife in the room. To each their own though. Moving on, Vasu then asks Rin to go back out to get more blood for his wife. He then promises he'll get her out of this place if she does. Rin agrees, which I think pretty much anyone looking for a safe way out would do at this point. At the same time, the extraction squad reaches the 10th floor while Rin is away from the room. Their medic ends up replacing the blood bag Rin was sent out for, and they start moving Vasu and his wife without her. Rin eventually runs into Singh while both of them fight their way through the halls. They briefly get split up when a big boy chases Rin off into another room. Fortunately, Buddy and Singh manage to get to her before the big boy got his infected paws all over her. Their reunion doesn't last long though, since the extraction team loses their medic during the evacuation. Vasu then suggests taking Rin with them after he already tried dipping out on her. The soldiers end up finding them, so Singh steps out thinking help has finally arrived. Then they shoot him in the shoulder on sight. Rin then attempts to stay with Singh, but the squad drags her away since they need a replacement medic, but he gets pulled along with her and Singh is left on the floor bleeding. Singh does manage to get back up though and continue to clap zombie cheeks. He also ends up fighting through the surviving soldiers before collapsing on the ground and being dragged to safety. What's funny about this entire section is that Vasu didn't care about Rin getting on that chopper until the medic went down. The second they needed a doctor, she went from being left behind to dragged along whether she wanted to go or not. Basically, being useful was the only thing that got her a seat on that helicopter. And that would apply to anyone in a situation like this. You're only as valuable as the value you can add. And I think we'd see a lot of this during a zombie apocalypse, to be honest. As people rebuild civilization, they'd likely pick and choose based on your ability to contribute. Anyway, so what's our takeaway here? I think it's pretty straightforward. If an extraction team enters the building they've stopped people from leaving due to a fast-moving virus, don't assume they're here for everybody. So keep your distance and play it by ear. Alright, so this is where a normal person's options officially run dry. The only way left out is being straight up overpowered. I'm talking cartoon protagonist overpowered. The kind of guy who punches his way through a hospital full of zombies and shrugs off a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Basically, you need copious amounts of plot armor to get out at this point. So forget planning an escape here. Let's just look at the exact level of ridiculous it takes to get out, because Singh's about to put on a clinic. With 15 minutes left on the explosives, your absolute last window to get out of here is getting smaller by the minute. So Singh lures the now reanimated soldier leader into a room and sets him on fire with flammable liquid and a flare. The fire gets rid of him, but it also sets off a sprinkler system, which somehow makes things worse. Because when the water hits the bodies that stop moving, they start popping and locking on the floor and start mutating into weird fish-faced creatures. Which I guess is kind of fitting considering fish started the whole mess in the first place. At the same time, the demolition charges are still ticking away, and the helicopter on the roof is still the only clear way out of this place, unless you want to swan dive out a window or off the roof. On the way out, they find Vasu standing over Anne's bed. It turns out she was bitten earlier when they were trying to extract her. Vasu insists that his wife is finally awakened. Rin tells him that they need to leave. He doesn't listen, and Anne ends up turning and biting Vasu while he keeps telling her he loves her. All the while, the zombies come pouring into the room. The others keep moving though, but another horde catches them near the parking garage. Singh realizes that all three of them won't outrun it together. So he peels away and pulls the infected toward himself while Rin and Buddy continue to head toward the roof. He ends up getting trapped inside a car, fights them off, then tears a grenade off one of the infected soldiers, blows the entire group around him apart, and somehow survives the explosion. I'm telling you, this is some Leon Kennedy level plot armor. There's just absolutely no way a normal person could survive at this point. Rin and Buddy eventually reach the rooftop, and the soldier checks them for bites, demand to know where Vasu and the rescue team is. She gives her head a little shake, signaling they didn't make it, and the soldier tells her they need to evacuate. But Rin tells them that Singh is still coming and begs them to wait, and the soldier fortunately gives them 5 more minutes. Singh eventually reaches the rooftop with 1 HP left, but the horde is right behind him. He walks toward the helicopter in slow motion, the same helicopter that probably could have waited for him, as the zombies come pouring out the door and onto the roof. He has one last epic showdown as the sun starts to rise behind him, while the helicopter lifts away. Seconds later, explosives bring the hospital down underneath him. So as you can see, it would have taken epic levels of plot armor to make it to that helicopter near the end of this movie. Alright, so what can we actually take away here? For me, it all comes down to one question you should be asking yourself the second the outbreak kicks off. Who controls the exits right now? Because at the start of the movie, the answer was you. The hospital doors led straight to the street, and nobody cared whether you walked out or not. That stopped the moment the announcement told everyone to get back inside. From that point on, the exits belonged to the military, and everything that happened afterward ran on their priorities. And to be fair to them, those priorities made sense. It was 500 people in one building against 5 million in Bangkok, so they handled the situation the same way outbreaks have been handled since the plague days, by sealing off the infected area and accepting whatever happens to the people still inside of it. The problem is that this time you were one of those people, and I think that's the part worth carrying out in real life. When something goes wrong at scale, the official response is built to protect the population. During any fast-moving virus, your safest stretch is the gap between the first clear warning and the moment somebody official takes charge of your ability to move away freely. Once roadblocks go up and doors start locking, or loudspeakers start telling you where you can stand, leaving stops being your decision. So if your gut tells you to go, you go while going is still up to you. And if you miss that gap and end up sealed inside like everyone else inside the hospital, remember what actually got Rin a seat in that helicopter. And I don't mean the insane amounts of plot armor. What I mean is that being useful may be the only ticket left for you. And unfortunately, not everybody can buy that ticket. Alright, so how does this movie end? I spent more time than usual recapping the movie, so I'm going to give you the ending at least. So, Rin and Buddy obviously make it out since they were on the helicopter. And as far as they know, Singh died when the explosive went off in the hospital. But if you're like me and you stay for the credits, you'll find out pretty damn quick that dropping an entire hospital on Singh still isn't enough to finish this guy off. He's basically the Terminator. Down in the wreckage, we see him climb up out of a tank of some sort. Then he lays some boots into an infected that survived. And that's where the movie ends. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and YouTube thinks you'll like this video. If you've already seen it, I've got a playlist of a lot more just like it.